Former leader of the Samata Party, Jaya Jaitley, has claimed that Christian Michel contacted her party when they were part of the coalition led by former Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Now, Jaya Jaitley said that Christian Michel offered her the opportunity to make a pile of money. She says that she immediately contacted her then Defence Minister George Fernandes and told him about the entire conversation and subsequently broke all contact with the Christian Michel. Listen in to this exclusive interview.
Mr. Jaya Jaitley, you have met Christian Michael. He called George Fernandes and wanted a meeting. Can you tell us what it was?
It was an interesting time because internationally India was in the news, and we didn't at that point have many friends because we had showed our nuclear capabilities at Pokhran. So Japan, the US, everyone was annoyed with India. So India was going through diplomatic efforts to bring countries around and make them understand what our security concerns were. So in the midst of all this, obviously the Defence Minister George Fernandes was as much keen and responsible to see that everything was set right. And at that time, I was told, because being the kind of staff or colleague who wanted to meet George Saab, if there was anything to do with his constituency, then other people would look for it, or if it was something to do which was political, then I would look at what was going on. So Christian Michael, I was told, was somebody who was an international person who wanted to help India in lobbying in the US among their senators and congressmen who are pro-India, to be able to put India's side of the picture on the nuclear tests. So George Saab was given this message, and he asked, but how do I know what he's all about? So the office asked Mr. Michael again, and they were told that he is giving the reference of Mr. Naresh Chandra, who was then the Indian ambassador in Washington. George Saab, knowing Naresh Chandra for very long, called him up immediately and asked him that there is this person wanting to meet me, and he claims that he knows you. So what do you say? So he said yes. He thought a bit, and then he said, yes, I do know him. Yes, I have met him. He didn't say don't meet him or whatever. So George Saab said he's wanting to meet me, and I think Naresh Chandra indicated that perhaps he could explore the possibility. So George Saab even then thought that he was probably preoccupied, or felt that perhaps I could first sound out this person and understand. Having lived in America and studied there and knowing how to engage with people who only speak English, he didn't send any of his other political colleagues because they were mostly Hindi speaking. So I was told that I could find out what exactly he was proposing.
And where did you meet him?
The meeting was fixed for the coffee lounge of the India International Center around mid-morning. So I went along there, and there was this tall, well-built person, probably in his mid-50s or something. And he sat down. I noticed that he had an aeronautical magazine on the table, and he had a press badge, one of those plastic laminated things. So I looked at it, and I must have looked a little curious. So he said, he patted his chest and the badge, and he said, you know, one needs this for cover. So I got a little suspicious. I said, what do you mean? What is there to cover? He said, well, no, not really. Actually, I bring out this magazine, and I represent this company, and I represent many of these aircraft deals and so on. But I just wanted to tell you about myself. And he brought out one of those old electronic notebooks, which were new and short-lived, of course, at that time. And he showed me how to try and say that he had the confidence of many high-ups in India for a very long time. And he'd been operating, I would say, in India for a long time. And it still didn't sound all that shady. So he said that, you know, I have been an informant to the Prime Minister when Narasimha Rao was there. He always wanted to know what Sonia Gandhi was doing when she was abroad. And so I reported to him that she stayed in one hotel but met visitors in another, and so on. And he was trying to win my confidence by saying that all these facts he conveyed back to big authorities in India.
So what you're saying is that he claimed that Narasimha Rao asked him to spy on Sonia Gandhi and get back with all the details.
I suppose there are people operating in this world who do all kinds of things at the same time. So maybe you do a bit of spying and then you get into the person's confidence and then you do something else and promote your business. I have no idea, because one has always been and remain quite innocent in this kind of world. So I had no idea, and I wasn't very impressed or interested in all that. It didn't make me feel that I should trust him for any reason, and I didn't quite like the whole way he was presenting his credentials. So then he said, well, you know, there are many people, I don't know if you know this, but there are many people, and he named a whole lot of known big arms dealers who have come up in various scam names, and or even not, who are supposedly well known on the circuit. And he said, you know, these are the people who operate here, but somebody's a small fry and somebody's not. And, you know, all these officials, and he named various past and present officials in different ministries who are working with them. I said, I'm sorry, I don't see how all this concerns me, and I'm not interested. I don't know what to say about what you're saying. So then he said, no, but you also need money, you have to run your party. And he was as blatant as that.
So it was basically a bribe.
It was a proposal that if I worked with him, then they would fund us. And since he had already indicated that he had some interest in selling some aircraft or whatever it was, that was the way it would go. So I said, I'm sorry, I don't do this kind of thing, and I'm not going to discuss this. So he said, well, no, but then how are you going to run your party? So I remember very clearly saying that I would rather beg on the streets than get involved like this. And after another word or two, I got up and left.
But that is not the end of the story, is it?
Well, not really. He pursued me on the telephone very often. Every 2 weeks, every month, every now and then over a period of many months. He kept calling and saying, can I meet, can we meet? You've had a misunderstanding. And I would say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to meet. Of course, when I came back that day, having met him, I think that evening or later, I told George Saab what had happened, that this was the result of that meeting. He was quite astounded and took it very seriously, and he said, you should write all this down and report it and address it to the Defense Secretary and send it to him. So I did precisely that. I have no idea as to what happened to that letter, but there the matter was left. And other than me trying to fend off this person every time he phoned, which carried on, as I said, for a few months, nothing happened. Then this Tehelka sting happened, and everything blew up by early 2001. At that time, interestingly enough, those were the days of fax machines. I got a fax from him. I was sitting there, and it came coming out of the fax, which said, I'm so sorry all this has happened. I had warned you, and with regards, trying to sound very concerned and very sorry for me, but saying that perhaps, I presumed he was saying if I had played ball with the right people, I would not have got hit by wrong people. So I kept that fax for a while, and since I was busy dealing with all the media and everything that was happening with Tehelka, it just lay there, and it lay there for quite some time, and then fax paper ink faded away in those days. So it faded, and I don't know, I don't have it now. But that was the end of it.
But then when Westland came up, you suddenly realized who you were in touch with.
Oh, yes, the interesting thing was I said, oh gosh, the name is the same. But when I saw the person on TV, I presume it would be the son, because they made clear at that time that the son was now operating on behalf of the father. I don't know if the son has the same name as the father. All I can say is that it wasn't the man I met, but the name was the same. And since this person is also involved in this arms deal kind of thing, and so was the father, maybe there's a connection or a relationship. I have not done any detective work on that, and I've just left it. But I thought this was a very important event for me when you connect it to the whole Tehelka thing, that this was how I really am in a real situation and how Tehelka projected me in a false situation.
Also, basically, it told you very clearly how all these arms traders worked.
Well, yes, and I've also mentioned in my book that Rajiv Shukla, who's more known for cricket, who was then an independent Rajya Sabha MP, he came to me before all this happened, soon after George Saab became Defence Minister, and he said, you know, Jayaji, you and George Saab are the most popular, sought-after people in the city. So I said, why is that? He said, because people feel that if they can just have a cup of tea with you, some people are paid 25 lakhs for having a cup of tea with you, because then they can show proximity and get some file pushed somewhere and get a huge commission on it. So I said that was the first inkling I had of how these defense deals actually work. Otherwise, one had heard it past history, Adnan Khashoggi, and how deals are built into arms arrangements or whatever. But it was all just newspaper storytelling, and it never really bothered to think about it impinging on our lives.